Hi, everyone. Today we're going to investigate the claim by Brenda that the Celtic Cross at our YouTube channel is a symbol of Satan. Uh, but I'm going to ask the question: isn't it a symbol of Christ in this situation? Why would you jump to these conclusions? Anyway, we're going to weigh her claims. We're going to prove them false. And the article she actually cites, Christianity.com, there you see it on the page. It's clearly stands against her. So that's what's kind of puzzling. And we'll go take a look at that. And first, let's hear her position and her argument.
Signs, and I'm going to point out, is that when you look at Jesus' words only picture icon for the channel, that is a Celtic cross. You can see the cross. I'm going to show you a different, so you can see what it looks like a little bit more closely, because those pictures are hard to see. Celtic cross. Okay, the Celtic cross is a Latin cross with a nimbus, a halo around something supernatural. It's considered to be a Christian symbol, but its roots are paganism, which is satanic. Okay? Satanic. The Celtic cross is satanic, guys. All right, just to see a few more pictures of what they look like. Okay? The Celtic cross, you can see the star. Yeah, guys, you can see when you look at it a little bit more closely, especially this up here, the 666 in that one. Yes, this is a Celtic cross, and it is satanic. All right, so we see that here in this channel's picture. And this man, Doug, is also a lawyer.
Okay, so I went in to take a look at what Brenda claimed was the frame that had the 666 on these particular uh, I guess somebody had a web page or something where they had some of these different Celtic crosses for sale. And who knows, maybe there could be even demonic use of the Celtic cross. I have no idea. But she said she saw 666 on one of these crosses. Please look closely. I'm leaving it up on the screen. Do you see a 666? I do not see one. Not one. So this is the screen. She says it was 666. So this seems more of imagination and wish fulfillment. You know, you want to see something evil, you're going to see something evil. Okay, so I want to discuss the tradition about the Celtic cross, its origin and meaning, and we really should allow the Christians of Ireland to speak. And even though they're Catholics, we should listen to what they say. They say this cross came from St. Patrick. Okay, it even says here some say that St. Patrick introduced the Celtic cross. And if you study the life of St. Patrick, he starts in there in the late 400s, and the Celtic cross is anytime from the late 400s all the way to the 10th century. Somewhere in there, this Celtic cross arises. So this is well after, at least he's been there, and well after he's founded Christianity in Ireland. By the way, he was just a regular citizen. He was a nobody, but he became a Christian. He was captured in a slave trade. If you read the biography of him, and he basically became a Christian all on his own, reading the Bible and all that. And this went on for years until finally the Catholics ordained him as a priest, and they allowed him to go back to Ireland where he had those experiences and was basically preaching to local people in Ireland anyway beforehand. And now they're going to allow him to go back and be an official representative of the Catholic Church. So he started as you would say today's like an evangelical Christian. Okay, so if he came up with this symbol, I think the obvious purposes to me are this is the cross of Christ, and the halo of Jesus on the cross would be the circle. And that's a common way of viewing Jesus. And so it's not just a cross, it's also with the halo. It doesn't represent the sun. In my view, it represents the glory of Christ. It's in stone. I mean, it's the best you can do. It's not a painting. So, and I actually think they're very beautiful. And you see how they decorate them. Typically, they're not just. They have some interesting beauty to them. So I think that makes them special. Okay, so let's go back to this. So St. Patrick is a civilian, comes to Christ without the auspices of the Catholic Church while he's in Ireland, preaches to them there, initially goes back to Ireland. This is all in the latter half of the 400s. and no monument. There's no evidence of any monument of the Celtic cross prior to St. Patrick. There's no pagan use of this ever proven by anything. The evidence is that it's sometime between the time that St. Patrick approximately is there and the 10th century is somewhere in there. This Celtic cross is used, and the only evidence is it's used by Christians. So that's really the main issue. I that's my takeaway from reading this. It's like it was used as a public monument, as a marking holy site. I mean, it was used as a traditional Christian cross, like no different than another Christian cross. So now, some people like Brenda say, "Oh, well, the halo is like the sun." Well, yeah, I mean, the sun has a glow similar to a halo, and there's no doubt that Sol Invictus had a halo around his head because he was wearing a solar crown with rays of sun coming out of his head. And yes, it could be that our Christian iconography was changed to make Jesus look more like the Sol Invictus, but that doesn't mean that Jesus, you couldn't depict him as having a holy glory about him anyway, because we know separately from the story of Moses that that's how it worked with Moses. His face was glowing, and people could see it, from a substantial distance. So if you wanted to imagine it, you can imagine Jesus had a similar glow, particularly in after he resurrected. I envision him as in light. That's how I envision Jesus. And currently, I think something's different than when he was walking around on earth. I could be wrong, but I whatever it is, it's if it helps someone spiritually to think of Jesus that way, I don't see that anybody else can fault you for it. It doesn't mean you're worshiping the sun. You're worshiping. I mean, you're not worshiping the sun in the sky. You're worshiping the Son of God. Okay. As son of God, that's totally appropriate, by the way. As son of God, you're allowed to do that too. The word worship is not exclusively for God, if you didn't know that. It's used for the king. The king gets worship. Worship is obeisance. You sit, you kneel down, and you that's the act of worship with a king in the First Chronicles, David and his people. Anyway, so yeah, the ultimate thing here is the lady says we can't know. We have no verifiable facts. And this is her final conclusion. Whichever way it is, however this came about, the meaning comes out of the heart of the person instead of being rooted in verifiable facts, because there's no absolute way of knowing one way or the other. But if you just use some logical sense, this symbol did not arise during the pagan era when it was just paganism and no Christianity had landed on the island. Christianity comes to the island through Patrick. Then this symbol is used at some time in the next 500 years. They're not exactly sure when. Therefore, anything that is similar to paganism is only because if they were using a cross and maybe they were using a circle, we don't know. Circle is not an uncommon symbol anyway, but you'd have to prove that a cross was used by a pagan, or you'd have to say that a circle was used by paganism and then show it was used in Ireland. We don't have any evidence of that at all. So, I just think it's mysterious that someone could just say they just know, like Brenda just know because it said some people. Some people think there's a possible connection to paganism. I know what they're thinking. The halo. The halo has a commonality with the solar crown that Sol Invictus wears on his head. That's all. But that doesn't mean you're worshiping the God of the sun. You're worshiping Jesus Christ as the Son of God. That's totally different, and that's why it's not paganism. So I'm sorry if you think so, Brenda, but it isn't. And what this lady says is, I have a right to my belief and not to be insulted and said that I'm worshiping Satan because the cross that you don't like has a circle in it, which is depicting Christ's glory. I'm sorry if you can't accept that, but that's how I see it. I think it's insulting, and you should not do that to people. That's improper. Okay, so we're done with the issue of whether the Celtic cross is a pagan symbol or not. It is not, and it was false. And the statement it had is 666, and one of the images from some other website even selling the cross didn't exist. So now I have to talk to Brenda seriously about something that everyone can learn from this. I'm not. I'm trying to educate her. I'm not trying to come down on her at this time. But I just want to show you a few things that you need to be aware of, Brenda. So, in your first video about me, or the last video about me, you said, so because he has sworn an oath to Satan, being a lawyer, he is influenced by spirits other than the Holy Spirit, the Rock Hoshadesh. So you have said, I've taken an oath to Satan. Now that's false, right? But that's your interpretation of Jesus' words. And I've shown you that that's not the correct version of Jesus' words. But I've given you an out because I've said, you know what? You could read Jesus' words in the Greek, which is an improper text, and you could come up with what she said. So I've given you an out on that because it's not your fault. Okay. But now you know the truth. So what you do from this point forward can determine how I will act in the future. Okay. And, but what I want to also concern yourself about, since I did a little research on this, is you have basically said, look at these next 3 points. I want you to see what you've done and to realize the scope of the amount of people can sue you is an enormous class of people. And I'm gonna have to explain this to you, and I'm saying this because people who follow you need to know they can't repeat these things without themselves exposing themselves to a massive amount of tort liability. And Brenda, I'm gonna suggest that you take down your, article about lawyers and professionals and doctors who take oaths are agents of Satan, and you're gonna hear why, hear me out, and anyone else who's contemplating that should not do that and should not share it for sure because you become agents or, and it's an actor. Anybody who spreads that around becomes a, co-liable, a co-tortfeasor. So let me read this to you, and I'm gonna explain to you why you have to be seriously concerned. I'm going to tell you what your legal defense would be, but why you get to use it. You say, you who take oaths for professions have sworn an oath to the devil. This is in your important messages to professionals at 5 minutes, 30 seconds. And I'm going to talk to you about a group libel defense in a second. Doctors and lawyers, they don't realize they are so stunted in their growth is because they have sworn an oath to the devil. That's at 7 minutes, 1 second. And lastly, number 4, they did not realize they were holding hands with the devil. That's at 10 minutes, 43 seconds. Okay, Brenda. So what I want to show you is you are going to be unprotected, likely, from any defense, what we call the group libel doctrine. I call it also a defense. Um, and you actually told all your followers, you have 3,000 subscribers, right? And each one of them who spreads your video to anyone else, they can also be sued in a conspiracy with you to defame and libel all the people in all the professions that this video goes out to, and other people hear about it, friends, family, all of that, and then are affected by what you're saying. And then they don't want to have any social relationships with the people or business relationships or whatever, and you create all this hate for people who you say have taken oaths to Satan and they've lost their free will. And you actually say, I have it here, the last thing you said in your video, in the one you wrote called "Important Messages to Professionals." Very last thing you said, if you know know of anyone with these jobs, you must learn. They must learn that they have sworn an oath to the enemy. So, that's the problem. You have to account for what you could be sued for, and we get used to the First Amendment. We think we can say anything we want. This is one of those weird exceptions to the group libel doctrine that you may be the only person who's ever found a way to fall out of the protection of what we call the group libel doctrine defense. So if you think about it, if you had said, Republicans are white supremacists. Okay, everybody knows that maybe there are some white supremacists amongst Republicans, but by and large, they're not. I mean, it's an exaggeration. Okay, so we know political discourse can be defamatory or whatever, but nobody takes it that seriously, and we want to have a vigorous debate and free speech, right? But what you've done is you've now done a couple things that are on the wrong side of the law. Number one, you're actually trying to incite hatred of like the most despicable kind, meaning like these people have taken an oath to Satan. They're not just supporters of Satan or compliant with Satan, or I mean, these are people who you said they're actually serving Satan, and they've lost their free will. You said, they have no more free will of their own. But here's why you can't get away from a libel suit. Normally, like I said in the example I gave you, the Republicans, if they none of them could sue over that individually because we know it's exaggeration and it's free speech. But what you've done is something that is every single person who has taken an oath fits within what you say is submitting themselves or taking an oath to Satan. Every single one of them. It's not there's no exception. It's not like, I mean, if you said every registered Republican by registering has become an agent of Satan, I mean, theoretically, if you could prove, and it's biblical, and you said, here's a Bible verse, you have now defamed each and every person because every Republican is by definition a registered person, right? That's what that's what you're saying. So that could be a suit where the group libel doctrine doesn't give you any defense because you fit within the exception. Let me show you the exception. So here's the group. You can look at the screenshot later. Anybody who's interested in this. So if you're just making a libelous statement against a group of people, lawyers, doctors, and so on, they can't generally sue you for an individual harm. They may have suffered from what you said because you know what? It's general speech and it may or may not really apply to each person in the class. But there's an exception. An exception is what you've done, Brenda, and everybody who spread your message might be sued too. Here's how it goes. In order to overcome the group libel doctrine, the plaintiffs, meaning the injured parties who might sue you and all your supporters who send your video around, must demonstrate the circumstances of the publication reasonably give rise to the conclusion that there is a particular reference to the member. And that's what I'm saying is because you've not made the reference need to reference their name. Every single person has taken the oath to become a doctor. You've taken the Hippocratic oath. Every lawyer has taken the oath in order to become a lawyer. Every policeman, every fireman, every profession basically in the state you live in has taken an oath to uphold the law when we are serving in professions that affect the law and the public interest. So you're talking about a huge group of people that can all sue you right now based on your video. So my recommendation to you, Brenda, is to take down your video that you call the important message to professionals video. Okay. You also should take down the one to me because it's also defamatory now. Now that you know the things you've said about me are false, okay, you should take it down. That's just another thing. I'm just putting that out there. So and so these are the things we need to adjust ourselves to and realize we live in a civilized world and we need to be kind and gentle with one another and try to help one another to communicate better. And I hope, Brenda, in the future you will communicate on a more constructive level. And here's how I would have handled it. Even if I took Jesus literally and didn't know about the Hebrew Matthew thing, I would simply say, it appears to me that if we take an oath, we're violating what Jesus says, period. I wouldn't leap to the next conclusion that means that taking an oath makes you an agent of Satan or it's an oath to Satan, because that's not Jesus doesn't say that expressly. All he says is if your word is yes or no, and you try to give any more justification for it by referring to God, so help me God or whatever, that's coming from the evil one. Well, that's talking about in the Hebrew Matthew, that would be the vain use of the name of God when you're not in a legal situation where you don't use God's name. That's not the proper time and place to use his name. That's a vain use of the name just to create credibility for yourself. So but if you extended that to every use of an oath, well then you've got to be very, very certain of that, and that's you can read the Bible and that you would not come out right on that. So it's just you have to be judicious in your language so that you do not defame people while you're disagreeing with people, and you don't ascribe to people evil motives. Maybe they do. Maybe you think that they're under a demon or Satan, But we don't say that. We don't agree with people who follow Paul. But you know what? Many of them are actually good Christians. They're just deceived, right? And their life is crippled because of who is in their life as a co-equal or greater authority than Jesus Christ. And that's what the problem is for them. So we don't call them under the influence of Satan. While maybe Paul was, if we think about his life, what was going on with Paul? Maybe he was. Remember, he said the angel of Satan would afflict him with torments, and his Jesus wouldn't release him from it. So he's fair. He's a fair shot to make the argument that he's in, by his own admission, he has a problem with an angel of Satan influencing him and controlling him. Okay, so he says it himself. So but that's a guy who's dead who can't sue you. You cannot take something like that and say every person who follows Paul is following a demon possessed person, and therefore they're all demonic and blah 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 blah. So this is you just have to know what you can say, what you shouldn't say, and it's a matter of just good discourse and being polite and not being just let the word of God teach people. Don't call people under the agency of Satan, and unless there's some real mandatory requirement. But because this is going to be a group libel suit against you, and I'm going to urge you as quickly as you can to take that video down. As you're doing that, please take that down, the video about me and my Celtic cross. Please, my goodness me. You can see now that wasn't true. Okay. And so I trust when you hear the truth that you will respond to truth and you will do the right thing. I trust you'll do that. And I hope this video will help you. Hope that this little legal lesson will also help others to know to not spread her video around for your own good. And I'm not trying to just trying to say, Brenda, you know what? I'll let you tell them. You tell your followers what you think they should do. I'm just telling you, I think that that's the best thing for everybody here, because I can see a big lawsuit coming, and I mean a massive one, because you don't get the group libel doctrine defense. And I don't know if you don't. I don't know if you know how many lawyers there are. Just if you took the lawyers in this country and then the doctors, just take those two professions, it's got to be. I think California, we have 270,000 lawyers. We're one of the biggest states, so that's But there's got to be several million lawyers, doctors. There's got to be several million doctors. If they all sued you for all the professional harm they've suffered, I mean, the massive class action against one individual, and whatever property you have will be taken away from you, and all your you'll never be on YouTube again. I mean, you're going to only hurt yourself. Now, again, if you might say, hey, you know what? That's the price of following Christ. I'm willing to suffer for Christ. But I've given you the alternative, which is to take a look at the Hebrew Matthew and decide from that, if you can't see the light, is that was the original version of what Jesus said, and you will not be you will not force yourself to go down this path, which will be, you can't file any tax returns, you're going to be sued, you're going to get all these other people sued, your life's going to be destroyed. That's not, it's something, wisdom. Have some wisdom and make a good decision here. I pray. I'm going to be praying for you, Brenda. All right. God bless everybody. Take care. Ciao. Bye.